Don't you worry now. We're here to help you. You just rest easy.
The winter was unforgiving. A thick blanket of snow had settled over the vast expanse of the ranch, turning the once familiar landscape into a desolate white wilderness. The cold air cut through the stillness, biting and relentless, while the wind howled in gusts that seemed to carry whispers of a harsh season ahead. The ranch lay at the edge of nowhere, nestled in the heart of a remote valley, far from the nearest town. It was a place where time slowed, where the days bled into one another in the quiet rhythm of solitude. Jack Avery, a seasoned rancher with weathered hands and eyes that had seen more winters than most, was accustomed to the harsh elements. His ranch was his world, a world of hard work, long hours, and a deep, unspoken bond with the land and the animals he cared for. He knew every tree on the property, every trail the cattle walked, and every corner of the barn. Yet, even he could not escape the bite of the bitter cold that had settled in for the season. Today, the snow fell heavier than usual, swirling in blinding gusts, casting a pale, eerie glow over the ranch. Jack tugged his scarf tighter around his neck and pulled his coat closer against the chill as he made his way toward the barn. The animals needed checking, especially in such frigid weather. His breath hung in the air in clouds, each puff a silent testament to the cold. It was a day like any other, or so he thought. But the storm had other plans, plans that would soon change everything. The wind howled, roaring through the barren fields like a beast in search of its prey. Jack pulled his collar tighter against the biting cold, his boots crunching through the snow as he made his way across the ranch. The storm had worsened faster than he had expected, and he needed to make sure all the animals were safe and sound before the worst of it hit. His breath came in ragged clouds, freezing instantly in the frigid air. He paused for a moment to adjust his scarf, eyes scanning the distance. The snowstorm reduced visibility to nearly nothing, and the world felt eerily still, as if holding its breath. His horse, a sturdy old mare named Ruby, was sheltered in the barn, and the cattle were huddled together in the far pasture. But something, an odd, unsettled feeling, kept gnawing at the back of his mind. Just then, a faint sound reached his ears, barely audible above the howl of the wind. A soft whinny, then another, quieter. His pulse quickened, and he instinctively turned toward the sound, his eyes narrowing in the snowstorm. There, near the edge of the property, 3 figures lay sprawled in the snow, their bodies barely visible against the white expanse. Jack's heart leapt into his throat as he rushed toward them, his boots sinking deep into the snow with every step. The wind whipped against his face, but he barely noticed. All he could think about were those 3 figures, the desperate cry of an animal in distress echoing in his mind. As he drew closer, the outlines of 3 foals came into sharper focus. They were no older than a few months, their bodies small and fragile, their coats thin and matted with ice and snow. One of them was barely moving, its legs twitching weakly in the cold. The other 2 were motionless, their eyes wide open but glazed, their breathing shallow and labored. A rush of panic surged through Jack's chest. He fell to his knees in the snow beside the closest foal, his hands shaking as he gently touched its head. It was cold, too cold, and the poor creature was barely alive. The rancher's mind raced, the reality of what he had found settling over him like a heavy weight. These foals had no business being out here in such brutal weather. They needed help immediately. With determination setting in, Jack scooped up the nearest foal in his arms, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't waste a second. They were losing time. Jack's heart pounded as he cradled the fragile foal in his arms, its tiny body stiff with cold. The storm was relentless, the wind howling like an angry beast, but all he could focus on was getting them to safety. There was no time to waste. He gritted his teeth against the freezing air, feeling the sharp sting of the snow against his face as he turned and began to stagger back toward the barn. His steps were labored, sinking deep into the snow with every movement, but the weight of the foal in his arms kept him moving forward. Behind him, the other 2 foals lay where he had found them, their fragile bodies barely visible against the whiteness of the world. The wind howled louder now, and Jack knew he couldn't afford to leave them behind. Without a second thought, he turned and dashed back to them, his hands raw and frozen from the cold. He didn't know how long they had been out there, but it didn't matter. Every second counted. The second foal was still breathing, though weakly, its ribs rising and falling in shallow gasps. The third foal, however, was motionless, its body stiff, almost frozen. Jack's heart sank as he knelt beside it, gently reaching out to check for a pulse. There was nothing, no response, no sign of life. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. There was still a chance for the others. He scooped up the second foal, its small body limp in his arms, and cradled it against his chest, feeling the warmth of his body trying to bring some life back to its chilled form. It was a race against time. He could already feel the signs of frostbite on his own hands, his fingers losing their dexterity as he gripped the foals, but he refused to stop. The barn was only a few hundred yards away now, but with the wind biting at his face, every step felt like an eternity. The snow seemed to grow deeper with each passing second, and Jack's legs were beginning to feel like lead. His breath came in shallow bursts, the cold air burning his lungs, but he pushed on, focusing on nothing but the task ahead. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Jack reached the barn. He stumbled through the door, gasping for breath, and immediately made his way to the back, where a wood stove crackled faintly, offering its warmth to the room. With trembling hands, Jack laid the first foal down on a bed of straw, quickly turning his attention to the others. His eyes darted between the foals, panic rising in his chest as he realized how close they were to slipping away. He worked quickly, wrapping each foal in blankets and placing them close to the stove, desperate to warm them before it was too late. Jack muttered to himself as he checked their pulses, his hands moving swiftly, his heart pounding with each moment that passed. The storm outside raged on, but inside the barn there was a quiet urgency, a determination that burned in Jack's chest. The foals' breathing was shallow, their eyes glazed, and Jack knew he had to act fast. He fed them warm water, gently coaxing it into their mouths, hoping the liquid would do its magic. Every action felt like it could be their last, but Jack refused to give up. Minutes stretched into hours. The wind outside continued its cruel symphony, but inside the barn, Jack's quiet prayers and relentless care began to make a difference. Slowly, the foals' breathing steadied, their bodies warming inch by inch. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. Hours passed in the dim glow of the barn, the storm outside a constant, deafening presence. Jack sat by the stove, his coat still on, his fingers numb from the cold, but he didn't dare leave their side. The foals lay wrapped in blankets, their bodies close to the warmth of the fire. Jack hovered over them, watching for any sign of life. His heart was heavy with worry, but deep down, a quiet hope began to stir. At first, there was nothing. The foals remained still, their chests rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. But as the minutes ticked by, a subtle change began. The foals' bodies, once stiff with cold, slowly softened, their muscles loosening as warmth seeped back into their limbs. Jack exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The first sign, a twitch. A small, involuntary movement of the legs. His heart leapt in his chest as he watched the foal closest to him stir. Its head shifted, eyes fluttering open for a moment before they closed again, too exhausted to do more than register the world around it. But that small movement was enough. It was the first real sign of life. Jack's hands shook as he reached out, gently brushing the foal's coat. He whispered soft words of comfort, as if his voice alone could help them find their strength. As if on cue, the second foal let out a faint whinny, its body squirming in the blankets. Jack's breath caught. "You're okay," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be okay." The warmth was working. The ice was melting, slowly but surely. For the first time since finding them in the snow, Jack allowed himself a small smile, barely a curve of his lips, but a smile nonetheless. There was hope now. The battle wasn't over, but it felt like they were on the winning side. As the foals began to show signs of life, Jack's thoughts drifted, as they often did when he found a moment of peace. He sat on a low crate beside the animals, his eyes watching them intently as they rested. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the barn, casting flickering shadows across the hay-strewn floor, but his mind was far from the present. It had always been this way. His life had become a quiet rhythm of work and solitude, each day flowing into the next like the never-ending seasons. Years ago, when the snow was not just a bitter reminder of winter's cruelty but a part of something shared, his family had worked the land together. His wife, Sarah, had been the heart of the ranch. Her laughter had filled the barn, and her kindness had softened the hardest days. But when she passed, taken too young by an illness that left him with nothing but memories, he had found it impossible to leave. This ranch was her legacy, and he couldn't bear to part with it. But that left him here, alone. Alone with the land, the animals, and the silence. The animals had always been his refuge, but as he looked at the foals now, fighting to survive in the same cold that had taken so much from him, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. He had become accustomed to being by himself, but at times, the isolation felt unbearable. He missed the sound of human voices, the warmth of shared laughter. Yet, in this moment, with the foals slowly recovering, Jack understood something deeper. Caring for them, fighting for their survival, it reminded him of the bond he once had with Sarah. It reminded him that love, no matter how fleeting, could still ignite a fire within, even in the deepest cold. And that was enough to keep him going. The days passed, each one a little brighter than the last. The storm had finally relented, leaving the ranch bathed in soft sunlight that felt almost foreign after the brutal winter. Inside the barn, the foals were recovering steadily, their small bodies growing stronger with each passing hour. Jack spent every moment with them, feeding them, warming them, and making sure they had everything they needed. The warmth of the barn, the crackling fire, and Jack's quiet presence were all the comfort they required to heal. By the end of the week, the foals were on their feet, wobbling unsteadily but determined. Their eyes were bright now, their coats no longer dull and matted, but shining with the resilience of life. The foal that had been closest to death had made a miraculous recovery, its spirit seemingly renewed by Jack's care. Each step it took was a testament to the power of hope and persistence. Jack watched them with a smile on his face, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The ranch had always been a place of hard work and solitude, but now it felt different. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was filled with the sounds of new life, the soft whinnies of the foals as they explored their new surroundings. It was as if the ranch itself was breathing again. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. The foals had given him something he hadn't realized he needed: purpose. They had reignited a spark inside him, reminding him that there was still love to be given, still life to nurture, still hope in the world. As he watched the foals trot around the barn, Jack whispered softly, "You made it. You all made it." And in that moment, he knew that their new beginning was intertwined with his own. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside bathed in a soft, golden light that seemed to promise new beginnings. Jack stood quietly by the barn door, watching as the foals took their first unsteady steps into the fresh, untrodden snow. Their coats, once dull and matted with ice, now glistened in the sun, their eyes full of curiosity and life. They had made it. And in many ways so had he. The ranch, once a place of solitude and quiet sorrow, had transformed in the days since the foals' arrival. The silence no longer felt like an oppressive weight on his chest. Instead, it was a peaceful quiet, punctuated by the soft whinnies of the foals and the occasional chirp of birds returning to the land. Jack had always found comfort in the rhythm of ranch life, the daily chores, the care for the animals, but now, with the foals running around the fields, there was a renewed sense of purpose. As he watched them play, Jack realized how much he had missed this sense of hope, of life growing and thriving, even in the harshest of conditions. The foals had come to him when he needed them the most, teaching him that no matter how cold the world might be, there was always room for warmth, for healing, and for love. He felt a deep, quiet peace settle over him as he leaned against the barn, the foals' joyful antics filling the space where silence once reigned. His life had been shaped by loss, but now it was being reshaped by the simple, powerful acts of care and compassion. The foals had found a new beginning, and so had he. For the first time in years, Jack felt the weight of the past lift. He wasn't alone. He never had been. The bond between him and the animals, especially these foals, reminded him that no matter how lonely the world might seem, there was always a way forward, always a chance to begin again.